Okay, let's unpack this. We are embarking on an exploration of a film that really didn't just capture the moment back in 1989.
No, it did much more than that.
It fundamentally rewrote the DNA of an entire genre. I mean, when you think of the modern romantic comedy, the smart dialogue, the complicated friendships, that whole question of timing,
You're thinking of the blueprint.
you are absolutely thinking about the blueprint set by Rob Reiner's When Harry Met Sally.
And that's precisely where our focus needs to be today. The plot itself is, on the surface, pretty simple. It's a straight line of two people meeting, clashing, connecting over years.
Right.
But our goal here is to look beyond that specific timeline of their relationship. We're going to be examining the film as a cultural, a historical, and an aesthetic turning point.
So we're looking at the sources that shaped it, the cast?
Exactly. The sources, the chemistry that define the cast, and the massive, just enormous legacy it continues to shape even now.
The numbers alone tell a story of, well, of a really disruptive success.
They really do.
This was a film made on what, a $16 million budget?
$16 million, yes.
Yeah.
Relatively modest.
And it managed to pull in $92.8 million just at the North American box office. But the real story isn't just the profit.
No.
It's the fact that this movie became a mandatory reference point. It became the standard that every single romantic comedy that followed had to measure itself against. So how did it do that? How did this one particular story break the mold?
Well, it broke the mold because it was built on a philosophical foundation, not a plot formula.
Okay.
The central question the film asks, can men and women ever just be friends? That's the real engine behind the entire creative process.
So it wasn't just a gimmick.
Not at all.
Yeah.
You have Rob Reiner directing, the brilliant Nora Ephron writing, and then Crystal and Meg Ryan anchoring it. The genius was in dissecting that one central tension.
And that dictated everything.
Everything. The unique structure, the dialogue's incredible realism. It's why it all still feels so relevant decades later.
The story of how it all came together is, I think, just as interesting as the movie itself. Let's start with that creative genesis because it's so deeply rooted in real life.
Specifically, the messy post-divorce life of the director.
Right.
What's fascinating is how directly the final film emerged from these really personal interviews. The story starts back in 1984. It's a meeting at the Russian Tea Room in New York.
The famous one?
The famous one. Rob Reiner, producer Andrew Scheinman, and Nora Ephron are all there. But they were initially supposed to be discussing a totally different project.
A project that Ephron, interestingly enough, immediately rejected.
She did. She shut it down.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until the conversation just naturally pivoted, as it does in New York,
To their personal lives.
to the current relationship status of the two men, Reiner and Scheinman.
Mm.
Reiner had just recently divorced Penny Marshall, and he was completely immersed in the chaos of being single again.
And Ephron saw a story there.
Immediately. Reiner himself recalled being in the middle of his single life, and he was just detailing one disastrous, confusing relationship after another.
He wanted to make a film about that specific modern neurosis.
Exactly. Two people who try to be friends, who actively avoid sex because they know it'll ruin everything, but who eventually give in to that tension anyway. Ephron saw the universal drama in that conflict right away.
So from those interviews, with Ephron basically acting as a journalist, pulling all this material from Reiner and Scheinman about their lives, that's where the character of Harry Burns was born.
100%. The character's pessimism, his sort of constant depression about love, but also his wit, that was all based directly on Rob Reiner's personality during that period.
And Sally was the counterpoint.
The necessary opposition, yes. She was based on Nora Ephron and some of her friends. She had that careful, what they later call high-maintenance energy, but also this optimistic drive.
And Ephron took all this raw, messy material and gave it a structure.
She gave it the vital structure, working on multiple drafts, over a few years, actually. This was while Reiner was off directing huge, but very different films.
Right, like Stand By Me and The Princess Bride.
Totally. Worlds apart.
And here's where the synergy of the team becomes so important. The film's structure, a lot of that fast-paced dialogue, it wasn't just based on Reiner's dating life.
No, it was heavily informed by his real-life friendship with Crystal.
Who was his best friend.
His best friend, exactly. And Crystal had basically experienced vicariously Reiner's entire return to being single.
So he came to the role of Harry with this almost encyclopedic knowledge of the character's mindset.
He didn't have to act the part of Reiner's confidant. He was the confidant.
And that dynamic, it translates directly onto the screen in these very specific, grounded ways.
Oh, absolutely.
For instance, that famous split-screen scene. Harry and Sally are on the phone watching TV, flipping channels together. That specific rhythm, that conversation, that was something Crystal and Reiner actually did together almost every night.
Which is amazing. It wasn't invented for the movie to be clever. It was documented reality being used to define a kind of modern intimacy.
It speaks to the power of finding something universal in these very specific personal details.
It does. It validated the sort of mundane rituals of friendship and made you feel like you were eavesdropping on something completely authentic.
And yet, when you look at the casting, Crystal is inseparable from the role now.
You can't imagine anyone else.
But he was a late addition.
He was. It's astonishing, really, given their chemistry, to think about how many major actors turned down the part of Harry Burns.
Sources confirm Tom Hanks, Richard Dreyfuss, Michael Keaton,
And Albert Brooks. All of them were offered the part.
The Albert Brooks rejection is particularly insightful. He reportedly said no because he felt the script was too similar to Woody Allen's work.
And that decision really highlights the challenge Nora Ephron was up against.
Right.
She was navigating a genre that Woody Allen had, for all intents and purposes, already defined in terms of neurotic urban romance.
So what did she do differently?
What Ephron achieved and what Crystal ultimately helped unlock was a tone that was less intellectually angsty and more emotionally grounded. It was more accessible than Allen's work, and that allowed it to reach a much, much wider audience.
Absolutely. But even with all that collaboration, maybe the most significant decision of all was about the ending. If the whole film was rooted in the pessimistic reality of Reiner's life, how do they justify that classic romantic ending?
It really underscores that tension between artistic truth and, what an audience wants. Initially, both Ephron and Reiner believed the true ending was for Harry and Sally to just remain friends.
To not get married.
To not get married. In their view, that was the realistic outcome for two people so mismatched and so resistant to commitment.
But they abandoned it, which, given how much of the film's genius was rooted in Reiner's trauma and pessimism, you could almost see abandoning that ending as a failure of nerve.
You could.
How did they justify that shift?
They justified it because Reiner's own life moved past the source of that trauma. While they were developing the film, Reiner met his second wife, Michelle. And that intensely personal, positive life event gave him the perspective he needed to go for a more optimistic final note. He said he just couldn't make a film about two people ending up alone after he had found happiness himself.
So while they got the classic romantic ending,
they admitted that generally it probably wasn't a realistic outcome for that specific kind of relationship.
That's a fascinating layer. The director's personal life literally changing the artistic message of the film in real time.
It created a satisfying conclusion, even if it was arguably less challenging than the original idea. That tension is really what defines the film's production story.
Okay. Moving on from the main characters, the success of this film isn't just about them.
No, not at all. The brilliance of Ephron's writing extended way beyond Harry and Sally. It relied on this fantastic structural framework. So let's talk about the ensemble and the interludes.
The supporting cast is absolutely crucial. Carrie Fisher as Marie and Bruno Kirby as Jess.
They're the functional counterpoint to Harry and Sally's prolonged misery.
Exactly. Their relationship served as this perfect structural contrast to the main 12-year dance of avoidance.
Marie and Jess meet through Harry and Sally, and they fall for each other almost instantly. They get engaged quickly. They provide a stable, functional relationship template.
They stabilize the whole universe of the film. They're showing the audience what an easier, more traditional path looks like.
The path Harry and Sally refused to take for a decade.
And that contrast, it just heightens the drama of the main character's struggle.
Yeah.
You're using the supporting couple as a yardstick to measure the central chaos.
And it also provides a necessary comedic foil. It lets you chuckle at Harry and Sally's neurosis without getting completely exhausted by it.
We should also mention the personal touches Reiner put in there.
Right. His mother, Estelle Reiner, had a role, and his daughter, Tracy, was also in the film. These little family elements, they added a real organic warmth to it.
But the truly revolutionary element of the structure, for me, is the use of the interludes. These segments with older, real couples discussing how they met, appearing at different points in the main story, they weren't just cute filler.
No, they were a stroke of genius in terms of narrative construction. Nora Ephron gathered these true stories during the screenwriting process. She just interviewed people who worked for the production company.
Ask them about their own origin
Their
stories.
own romantic origin stories, yes.
And while the final material was rewritten and reshot with actors for, cinematic quality,
Of course.
the essence of those honest, anecdotal stories, the real stories of ordinary people finding love, it provided this grounding realism that just elevated the whole fictional story. They served as this pseudo-documentary affirmation that, yes, long-lasting, imperfect love is actually possible.
It was a technique that infused the film with this really unexpected emotional depth. By showing these brief vignettes of decades-long success, the movie framed Harry and Sally's neurotic journey not as some unique Hollywood drama, but as just another complicated chapter in the larger universal tapestry of American romance. It suggested that even the most chaotic relationships can eventually find their footing.
And the structure itself is literally bookended by this device, the final couple interviewed, right before the credits roll.
It's Harry and Sally themselves.
It's Harry and Sally giving their own origin story. It's such a clever framing device. It cements the idea that they are now part of this larger, real-life legacy of love stories. A masterful way to connect the fictional to the authentic.
It frames the movie not just as entertainment, but as an exploration of romance in general. It says their story, no matter how neurotic, is universally valid.
And if we're going to talk about universality, we have to address the one scene that transcends the entire movie.
The scene that became instant cultural shorthand.
The lunch at Katz's Delicatessen.
It is the definitive moment. It didn't just define the film, it defined a decade of conversation about gender, performance, and expectation.
The scene's origin is fascinating because it was conceived to rebalance the narrative.
That's right. Billy Crystal recalled that early cuts were focusing too heavily on Harry's point of view, his neurosis. They needed something substantial, something uniquely Sally's, to talk about.
And Nora Ephron suggested the topic of women faking an orgasm.
A great universal topic that had rarely been tackled so directly in a mainstream Hollywood movie.
Meg Ryan was immediately on board. And crucially, it was her suggestion that it should happen in public.
In a busy New York restaurant. That decision maximized the comedic tension, forcing this very intimate performance into a completely exposed setting.
And the execution of that scene is just legendary, not just for the dialogue, but for the physical comedy. Sources confirm Ryan spent hours demonstrating fake orgasms as they shot it over and over again from all these different angles. This wasn't just a throwaway moment. It was a carefully staged, physically demanding piece of comedic performance.
And the immediate reaction at screenings proved its power. Rob Reiner talked about one test screening where the audience response was just split down the middle by gender.
I remember reading this.
All the women were laughing hysterically, and all the men were sitting in this stunned, embarrassed silence.
That reaction alone showed that the scene hit a massive nerve about the different experiences within relationships.
Yet the genius of the whole thing is crystallized by that perfect final punchline.
After Sally's very convincing performance, a nearby patron looks on and just deadpan says to the waiter, "I'll have what she's having."
And that patron was, of course, played by Estelle Reiner, Rob Reiner's mother.
And the credit for that iconic line goes to Billy Crystal. He came up with it.
He did. And its cultural recognition is immense. The quote is number 33 on the American Film Institute's 100 movie quotes list. When Estelle Reiner passed away in 2008, the New York Times basically referred to her as the woman who delivered one of the most memorably funny lines in movie history.
And the physical legacy is still there. If you go to Katz's Delicatessen in Manhattan today, they still have a sign hanging above that table.
Where Harry met Sally. Hope you have what she had.
It's a literal pilgrimage site for fans of the movie.
The ability of this one moment to just permeate culture decades later is remarkable. You saw it in 2013 with that improv everywhere reenactment at the deli.
Right, where a lookalike couple did the scene and then suddenly 30 other people joined in.
It just shows the scene's infectious universal recognition.
And most recently, it was recreated for a Hellmann's Mayonnaise ad during the Super Bowl.
With Ryan and Crystal and Sydney Sweeney delivering the famous line.
35 years later, that moment is still instantly recognizable and commercially bankable. It really speaks to Nora Ephron's genius.
It's the perfect blend of a high concept and something deeply relatable, which is why it continues to be a blueprint for comedic tension.
Beyond the dialogue in that scene, we should also talk about the elements that give the film its timeless warmth, specifically the music.
The Harry Connick Jr. soundtrack.
And the brilliant box office strategy.
The soundtrack is absolutely a signature element. It's the sonic signature for this very adult urban romance. Rob Reiner was clear he wanted to avoid the synth sounds of 80s pop.
He wanted something classic.
Classic, warm, and sophisticated. He was introduced to Harry Connick Jr. by Bobby Colomby, the drummer for Blood, Sweat, and Tears.
Who just gave him a tape.
Just gave him a tape of Connick's music. And Reiner was instantly struck by his voice, noting he sounded like a young Frank Sinatra, a voice that just evoked that golden age of New York romance.
It was the perfect sonic backdrop. It created a feeling that was nostalgic, but also felt contemporary for the setting.
And the commitment was total. The soundtrack album consists entirely of standards performed by Harry Connick Jr. with a big band and orchestra arranged by Mark Shaman.
That choice, to commit to the Great American Songbook instead of chasing trends, is why the film felt timeless from day one.
It provided a sophisticated, mature tone that just elevated the dialogue.
And Connick's work got immediate recognition. He won his first Grammy for Best Jazz Male Vocal Performance for it.
Commercially, the album was a huge success. It went to #1 on the Billboard Traditional Jazz chart, eventually going double platinum. This wasn't just movie music. It was, in a way, a revival of a genre for a mainstream audience.
It was a massive commercial win for standards. And tracks like It Had to Be You, which is the film's emotional anchor.
Where or when, but not for me.
They featured arrangements co-written by Connick and Shaman. It was this perfect blend of classic sound with a fresh energy.
The album also featured icons like Louis Armstrong, Ella Fitzgerald, Sinatra.
It really solidified that nostalgic feel.
It's important to note, though, the modern challenge with music licensing.
Right.
In 2012, people noticed that significant parts of that iconic soundtrack had been changed for the Amazon digital release.
Which highlights the complex issue of music rights in the digital age. It's this quiet challenge to preserving a film's original aesthetic integrity.
Shifting to the business side, the way Columbia Pictures handled the release was just as strategic as the music.
They used a technique known as the platform release.
Which is a move you usually see for prestige or art films, not for what looks like a mainstream romantic comedy, especially in the summer of 1989. Why did they choose that? It was crucial because they were competing against absolute behemoths. The summer of '89 was dominated by spectacle. You had Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade and Tim Burton's Batman.
So a wide opening would have just buried them.
It would have been buried under the weight of those visual effects blockbusters. The platform strategy opening in just a few select cities first allowed the film to completely bypass that spectacle war.
So it insulated the film. Instead of marketing with explosions, they relied on word of mouth.
Entirely on word of mouth to generate positive buzz before gradually expanding.
And an approach like that is tailor-made for an Ephron script.
It is. A film driven by witty dialogue and character chemistry needs critics and early adopters to talk about it, debate it, and generate that organic interest.
And the initial results proved the strategy was flawless. The opening weekend grossed over $1 million in just 41 theaters.
That figure is staggering in context. That opening weekend was the second highest grossing opening for a film on fewer than 50 screens at that time.
Second only to.
Second only to the legendary opening of Star Wars in 1977. That comparison alone tells you everything about the immediate cultural capture.
The film opened in early July and, powered by that relentless positive buzz, went into wide release later in the month.
Eventually expanding to over 1,000 theaters and grossing its final $92.8 million in North America.
It was a crucial lesson. A smart, dialogue-driven comedy could compete with action movies if it had a strong narrative and a sophisticated distribution plan.
And that overwhelming success leads us right into the final discussion. Its enduring legacy.
It didn't just succeed financially, it became the template, the new standard for romantic comedies.
An unmistakable new standard. The film is recognized as the quintessential contemporary feel-good relationship movie that even decades later still rings true.
The connection with audiences was unique. Nora Ephron reportedly kept getting letters for years from people obsessed with the film,
describing their own real-life Harry and Sally relationships.
And that universality is why its cinematic DNA is, as they say, in virtually every romantic comedy that's been made since.
You can trace its influence everywhere. The nonlinear structure, the focus on friendship as the pre-romantic stage.
The dialogue.
The whip-smart dialogue. You see it clearly in films like A Lot Like Love, No Strings Attached.
Even the Hindi film Hum Tum.
And definitely, maybe. The influence is structural, tonal, and even semantic.
What do you mean by semantic?
Well, the film popularized concepts that moved out of the script and into our everyday vocabulary for dating. We owe terms like the high-maintenance girlfriend or the transitional person to this film.
They became cultural shorthand.
Instantly relatable labels for relationship archetypes that resonated with everyone's own dating anxiety.
The film's formal recognition also matches its cultural impact. Nora Ephron won the BAFTA for Best Original Screenplay.
And was nominated for the Academy Award and the Golden Globe. It was a formal acknowledgement that the writing was genuinely revolutionary.
Billy Crystal and Meg Ryan also won American Comedy Awards. But the true measure of institutional acknowledgement is from the American Film Institute,
which recognized the film across multiple distinct categories.
The AFI lists alone paint this comprehensive picture. It's number 23 on 100 Laughs, number 25 on 100 Passions.
And it's number 6 on the top 10 romantic comedy films list.
That's a triple threat recognition. It covers humor, romance, and genre definition.
And its status as a permanent piece of American cinematic history was finally cemented in 2022.
When it was selected for preservation in the National Film Registry by the Library of Congress.
A designation only for films deemed culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. It confirms When Harry Met Sally is not just a beloved movie, it's a protected document of its time.
And it's worth noting, before we close, that the story was strong enough to translate to the stage.
In 2004, at the Theatre Royal Haymarket, with Luke Perry and Allison Hannigan.
And later, Molly Ringwald and Michael Landis. It just proves that the narrative engine is strong enough to live beyond the screen, driven purely by the dialogue and structure.
This whole exploration really confirms that the film's status as a blueprint is profoundly well-earned. It wasn't just a charming script with 2 good performances.
No.
It was a carefully constructed piece of cinema defined by collaboration, real-life inspiration, groundbreaking structural devices like those interludes, the incredible dialogue, and a masterful distribution strategy.
Its genius was taking the chaotic, messy reality of being single and packaging it into this aesthetically pleasing, universally relatable story that redefined a genre.
Absolutely.
So what does all this mean for you, the listener, and for the genre it created? We started with the question, can men and women be friends? The film ultimately gave us an optimistic yes, leading to marriage. But when you look back at the source material and you remember that Nora Ephron and Reiner initially resisted that romantic ending, feeling that remaining friends was the true ending.
The one rooted in the raw interviews of Reiner's life.
Exactly. This raises an important question. Is the most powerful legacy of the film not the romantic answer it ultimately delivered, but the artist's initial conviction that the most relatable, enduring art often comes from messy, unresolved reality, even if the commercial demands of Hollywood eventually required a wedding? Something to think about as you watch your next romantic comedy. Thanks for listening.